Consent workshop this Friday. What? What is this? Why do I need to learn about consent? I know not to rape people. I don't think I need somebody telling me how to have sex. Hi everyone, my name is Sarah and welcome back to Everyday Consent. If you're watching this channel, you probably already agree with me that consent is a topic worth talking and learning about. But that's not universally accepted. Many people feel that any suggestion that they learn about consent is insulting or condescending. Some feel so upset that they write angry blog posts and take ill-advised photos of themselves holding whiteboards claiming that rapists never look like wealthy-looking white men. These reactions are missing the point. As I've talked about in previous videos, the world is not broken up into black and white categories of evil people crossing boundaries and good people never crossing boundaries. Consent is complicated, it's important, and it's something we all need to learn about. So when someone feels that a class about consent is insulting or condescending, it's tempting to simply write off that reaction as ignorant and move on. But honestly, I think it's a more universal reaction than some of us might want to admit. There are definitely times when I can relate to that feeling, and my guess is that you can relate to it too. If there's something about consent that you don't already know and that you need to learn, that might mean that what you're currently doing about consent is wrong. And that's a scary thing to hear. Feeling a little defensive in response is very understandable. I have a whole YouTube channel dedicated to consent and communication, and even I still freak out a little inside when a partner tells me I did something they weren't comfortable with. But what's so special about consent that we have this reaction? People don't freak out when told that they need to learn about geometry, for example. I've never seen a blog post written about how insulting it is to have geometry classes because I think I can figure out how to calculate shapes on my own. Thank you. So why is it so insulting and even scary to think that we need to learn about consent? Or to think that we might currently be bad at consent? I think it's because consent encompasses two big things that we think are really important to be good at, and we expect everyone to understand without any help. Those two things are being a good person and sex. Being a good person is obviously important, right? Just by definition. If someone doesn't understand how to be a good person, then they must be a bad person and they're a danger to society. They should be locked up, right? Like, that's a problem. So since being a good person is so important, then it should be easy to define, right? So we can all agree on the same definition to figure out who's being a good person and who's being a bad person, lock up the bad people so the rest of us can live in harmony. Except defining what it is to be a good person is kind of exactly what most religions and legal systems are trying to do. And I don't know if you've noticed, but they don't always agree with each other. And there even tends to be some conflict about that. Awkward. Part of the reason that there's so much conflict is that people don't want to be told that they're a bad person. I know I don't, and you probably don't either. If someone you don't know walks up to you and says, hey you, you're a bad person, are you going to respond with, oh, well, yeah, I hadn't considered that, thank you, yeah. No, you're much more likely to write them off and move on with your life. And you'll probably think that they're being a jerk for saying that to you in the first place. Everyone thinks that they are the hero of their own story. Even someone doing things that you think are truly awful probably still thinks of themselves as a good person. So anyway, in short, being a good person is something that we all think is really important to understand. So we want to pretend that it's easy to understand and agree on. But in reality, that's just not the case. And then the other part of consent is sex. At least in the US, sex is something that we apparently think is really important to be good at. From sultry advertisements promising that this is the brand of soap you want to buy if you want to attract a mate, to songwriters and movie characters boasting about their sexual prowess, we are constantly given reason to attach our sexual abilities and sexual attractiveness to our confidence and our self-worth. Nobody wants to be told that they're bad at sex. Can you imagine somebody telling you that you're terrible in bed? That would be a huge insult. If someone is bad at sex, then they're the butt of the joke. They're the person that can't last long enough in bed, or the person that gives terrible blowjobs. And nobody wants to be that person. Any lack of sexual knowledge or prowess can feel deeply shameful. So you would think that since not understanding or not being good at sex can be so shameful, that we would value learning about sex quite highly. But oh no, anything teaching about sex is seen as seedy or scandalous at minimum. The most mainstream thing you'll find are giggly sex tips in magazines like Cosmopolitan, but even those are seen as trashy or dirty. At least in the US, we are terrible at openly talking about sex, let alone teaching about it. We are ashamed of talking about sex, and we are doubly ashamed of admitting that we don't know or understand something about sex. Even among adults, we tend to talk about sex in implications and euphemism, or censor the heck out of anything that doesn't. And then we'll turn around and ridicule people for not understanding those euphemisms. And even when it comes to teaching the basics of anatomy and sexual health to young people in school, in many cases we don't. or we just straight up lie to them. Sexual education in the US is abysmal. Only 35 states require any sexual education at all, and only 13 states require that what is taught actually be, accurate. So sex too is something that we really want to believe that we understand, but in many cases, we just don't. So since the essence of consent is how to be a good person while having sex, it's not surprising that we might have a lot of baggage around that. And that's at least one big part of why you, me, or anyone else might initially freak out when told that consent is something that we need to learn about. But it is something that we need to learn about. So hopefully trying to understand this knee-jerk reaction and empathize with it will be helpful in trying to move past it and learn anyway. But enough of what I think, I want to know what you think. Let me know down in the comments if you have any thoughts about today's video, or you can always email me at everydayconsent@gmail.com. If you like this video, hit that like button, and if you want to see more from me, don't forget to subscribe. Happy consenting, folks. I'll see you next week. Consent is important even when you're thirsty, especially when you're thirsty. I'm evolving like a Pokemon. Sarah does magic tricks. Woo! It appeared. Do you think people would watch my magic show? Awkward.